The training hall of the Cravaxian Combat Academy smelled of ozone and cold metal, the kind of sterile air that came from 1,000 purification cycles scrubbing out the blood of 1,000 duels. Holographic banners rippled along the vaulted ceiling, displaying the crests of a dozen species who had sent their finest young warriors to compete for a place among the Confederation's elite officer corps. Vera Solene stood near the back of the arena, arms crossed, watching the other cadets stretch and posture. She was the only human in a class of 43. The Cravaxians were tall, chitinous things with retractable blade limbs. The Tornasi were squat and dense-muscled, built like living tanks. The Ishkur were fast, inhumanly fast, with reflexes clocked at triple the average humanoid baseline. And then there was her. Soft-skinned, slow-twitch by comparison, fragile-looking, by every metric the Confederation's threat assessment algorithms could produce. That was exactly why Ronan Vex had chosen her. Ronan was Cravaxian nobility, third blood of House Vex, and he had made it his personal mission over the past 6 weeks to remind Vera of her place. He was broad-shouldered even by his species standards, his exoskeleton a deep obsidian that caught the light like polished stone, and he moved through the academy the way predators move through territory they considered already conquered. "The human returns," Ronan said, his translator collar rendering his clicking dialect into flat, accented Confederation standard. He rolled his shoulder blades, and the twin bone blades sheathed along his forearms extended half an inch with a soft, wet click. "I was beginning to think you'd withdrawn. Saved yourself the embarrassment." Vera didn't look at him. "Wishful thinking doesn't suit you, Ronan." A ripple of amusement went through the nearby cadets, not at Ronan's expense, but at hers. They'd seen this before. 6 weeks of sparring matches where Vera had been thrown, pinned, and humiliated by opponents who outmassed her by 50, 60, 70 kilograms. She'd lost more matches than she'd won. The instructors had taken to calling her matches instructional, a polite academy euphemism for watch the small one get flattened. What none of them had bothered to ask was why she kept getting up. "Instructor Kolth has paired us for today's evaluation," Ronan said, gesturing lazily toward the sparring circle etched into the floor, its containment field humming faintly blue at the edges. "Lethal force protocols enabled, as is traditional for third-tier assessments. I trust you understand what that means." "I do." "Then perhaps," Ronan said, baring the serrated edge of his mandibles in something that passed for a smile among his kind, "you should reconsider. There is no shame in withdrawing from a match you cannot win. Humans are not built for this. Everyone here knows it. Even your instructors know it. They only let you stay because the Confederation likes its diversity quotas." A few of the Tornasi cadets laughed, short, barking sounds like gravel shifting. Vera finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were pale gray, and there was nothing in them. No anger, no fear, no wounded pride. Just a flat, patient calculation that, had Ronan been paying closer attention to anything beyond his own reflection in the arena's polished floor, might have unsettled him. "You talk a lot for someone who's never actually seen a human fight," she said. "I've watched you lose 11 times. You've watched me hold back 11 times, Vera said. "There's a difference. But you're right about one thing. I do understand what lethal force protocols mean." She rolled her neck, and something in her posture shifted, some coiled readiness settling into her spine like a switch thrown. "It means I don't have to hold back anymore." Ronan's mandibles twitched, the Cravaxian equivalent of a raised eyebrow. Before he laughed, a dry clicking sound. Bold words. "Step into the circle and find out." Instructor Kolth, a scarred veteran of the Tornasi warcast with one cybernetic eye, called the match from the observation dais with visible disinterest. He had seen Ronan Vex fight 11 times this term and win 11 times, each victory more theatrical than the last. He expected a 12th. The containment field sealed with a soft chime. Lethal force protocols engaged. The field would hold in anything that happened inside and release nothing that wasn't still breathing on its own power. Ronan didn't wait for the formal signal. That was his pattern. Cadets had noted it, whispered about it, and done nothing, because nobody wanted to be the one to report a noble house's son for a technicality. He surged forward the instant the field hummed to life, blade limbs extending to full length, moving with the terrible, practiced speed of a species built across 10,000 years of ritual combat. He struck first. The blade meant for Vera's throat carved through empty air. She was no longer where she had been standing. In the half-second between the field's chime and Ronan's lunge, she had already read the angle of his shoulders, the shift of his weight onto his back legs, the telltale flare of his blade sheaths, and she had moved, not away, but through the gap his own momentum had opened. Ronan's strike carried him half a meter past where she'd been. He was fast. He had always been fast enough. It had simply never mattered before, because none of his opponents had ever needed to be faster than fast, only faster than him. Vera was already inside his guard. What the Confederation's threat assessment algorithms never accounted for, what no xenobiology textbook on any allied world had ever properly modeled, was that humans were not, in fact, a slow species playing catch-up to their neighbors. They were a species that had spent 200,000 years being the slowest predator on their own planet, hunted by things faster, stronger, better armed by nature in every conceivable way, and had survived anyway. Survived by being smarter about violence than anything that had ever tried to eat them. Survived by learning that speed and strength meant nothing if you couldn't predict where the next attack was coming from, and that if you could outthink a saber-toothed cat, you could outthink almost anything. Vera's hand closed around the joint at Ronan's elbow, the weak point behind the blade sheath, the one place a Cravaxian's chitin gave way to softer tissue, the one detail buried on page 400 and something of the Xenoanatomy manual that Ronan had clearly never imagined a human would bother memorizing. She twisted. The sound Ronan made was not dignified. It was not the sound of a noble house's son. It was the raw, animal shriek of a body discovering, in real time, that its weapon arm no longer answered to its will. He started. Vera didn't let him finish the sentence. She drove her palm heel up and under his mandibles with a precision that had nothing to do with strength and everything to do with knowing exactly where Cravaxian's secondary nerve cluster sat, a blow that dropped him to one knee. And before the watching cadets had fully processed that Ronan Vex, undefeated, 11-0, third blood of House Vex, was on the ground. Vera had already taken his own severed blade from where it had clattered free of his ruined arm. "You said there was no shame in withdrawing," she said quietly, standing over him. "From a match you cannot win." Ronan's remaining good arm scrabbled uselessly against the floor. His single working eye, wide with something that had never once, in his entire privileged life, been directed at Vera Solene. Genuine fear, fixed on her face, searching for mercy that would not come, because she had told him plainly, when the field first sealed, exactly what she intended, and he had laughed at her for it. "You called us fragile," Vera said. "You called us slow. You called us a diversity quota, and you drew first blood before Kolth even gave the signal, because you never once believed you'd need to earn this." Kolth is cybernetic. I had gone very still on the observation dais. Around the circle, 42 cadets stood in absolute, ringing silence. "I don't hold back anymore," Vera said, and there was nothing cruel in her voice, only the flat, terrible certainty of a species that had clawed its way to the top of its own food chain by refusing, ever, to make the same mistake twice. "You should have asked why humans were still here, Ronan. Every species that underestimated us usually only got to ask that question once." The blade came down. The containment field held everything inside it, exactly as designed, and released nothing that was still breathing on its own power. When the field finally chimed open, Vera Solene stepped out of the circle alone, and Instructor Kolth, who had fought in 3 border wars and had not flinched at violence in decades, found that for the first time in a long, long career, he did not have a single word of correction to offer.